remember, Alzheimer's Today is a great reference. They will send this to you completely free. Their phone number, if you'll take this down, because this is important for a lot of reasons, is 866 232 8484. 866 232 8484. Now you say, well, why do you need to know that? They have licensed social workers that you can talk to completely free about your loved one's situation. Mama's doing this. We don't know what to do. Or we need some information on Lewy body dementia. They will send that to you completely free. And so this is the magazine, and this is the newest one that came. I'll be glad for you to look at it, but I need to take that one home because I haven't read it yet. The other one is called Brain and Life. Brain and Life. And if you'll Google that or whatever the case may be, again, you can get it online or you can get it sent to you completely free. It's not always about dementia, but normally there's something in there. Any type of neurological issues, that magazine does a great, great job of dealing with it. Why are we talking about this? Well, first of all, because it's something that's real in the lives of people. And secondly, it was a part of our life. We noticed back in 2013 that my mom, who was 86 at the time, was forgetting things. We'd be at her house, her and Dad's, and then 2 days later we'd be talking to her. When are y'all coming to see us? I haven't seen you in so long. And we had just been there. And so we started doing some work, and I led the way to help take them to UAB Kirkland Clinic in Birmingham, Alabama, a great resource. And they did an MRI, and I received that phone call that you don't like to get on June the 9th, 2016 at 5:30 in the afternoon. I'll remember that. Dr. Marie Nadelson, the neurologist who had done the work with Mom, said after studying the most recent MRI from the one that we took 3 years ago, we see significant shrinkage of the brain. The diagnosis is dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. The median for Alzheimer's disease is typically 6.5 years. Mom died 39 months later. And so it became personal. And I'm doing this in her memory and in her honor. And so if you'll get me to that screen, we'll start looking at the handout. Okay, there you go. Here's the answer questions, and you fill in the blanks as the case may be. The word Alzheimer's is of German origin and means demented or out of mind. The answer is false. In 1901, Dr. Lois Alzheimer, a neurologist, pathologist, and psychiatrist, began to treat a patient by the name of Augusta de Tour, who had mind issues. When she died in 1906, he took her brain and began to examine it. It was like Swiss cheese. Cells of the brain were tied up in knots like a rope that contained amyloid and tau plaque. In 1907, he gave the findings, and they named it Alzheimer's disease after him. Number two, 30% of the people in any given audience, like this audience, or someone you love, will one day experience dementia. True or false? What do you think? The answer is false. Dr. David Hutchings, a well-known neurologist in Boston, says that in any given audience, 53% of the people will either one day themselves develop dementia or have someone they know develop dementia. With that idea in mind, let me ask this question. How many of you have either a loved one or a friend that deals with dementia now? Raise your hand. Okay. Basically what we're looking at, half the audience. And so it's something that is real. Number three, dementia studies show that if a family member has Alzheimer's, then there is a 50% chance that they will develop this disease. That is false, but the number is getting greater, and it is my wife's greatest concern because her great-grandmother at 85 had this disease. Her grandmother at age 75 had that disease, and then her mother at age 65 developed the disease. Do you notice the progression there? On top of that, 2 aunts as well. There are 3 components that enter into a family dealing with the idea, the possibility or probability of dementia. 3 components. Number 1, family members. Do you have family members who have it in your family? That's one thing that goes along with it. Number 2, the age that that family member acquired it. The younger they acquired it, the more susceptible you will be because it's perhaps in your genes. And then number 3, how close you are to those family members. Are you talking about a second cousin? That's a whole lot better as opposed to a parent having it, okay? So the closer the relationship to you, the more possibility exists that it's something that you may have to deal with as well. They deal it with, they call it this way: first degree relatives or parents, children, and siblings. Second degree parents, that is, or grandparents, grandchildren, aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews. Third degree or great grandparents, great grandchildren, great nieces and nephews, and cousins. So the possibility is there. It doesn't have to be automatic, but the possibility is there. And if this is a parent or a brother or sister that's dealing with this, just understand that the possibility is greater that that's going to be something that you may have to deal with as well. A family history of Alzheimer's does not mean that a person is going to develop the disease, and a lower risk does not mean that a person will get the disease. We just need to keep those thoughts in mind. Number 4, dementia studies, okay. With Alzheimer's, short-term memory is often affected before long-term memory. Very true. Think of it this way. If dementia is the family name, Alzheimer, however you want to say it, is the firstborn child. 60% of all folks who have dementia have Alzheimer's, and one of its main components is short-term memory. Clinicians count short-term memory as anything that happened 2 minutes ago to 5 minutes ago. So think about that person who you go to visit and you tell them who you are, and then they look at you 5 minutes later and say, "Now, who did you say you were?" Because they just can't pull it up. Long-term memory, they can remember. Things that happened 30 years ago, they may get a few of the ideas mixed up, but they can remember that. Short-term memory, because it's in the hippocampus right up front, has been destroyed. If you don't remember anything else I say tonight, remember this. Dementia is a disease of the brain. It is not a disease of the soul. I'll let that sink in for a moment. They're not acting the way they act because they just want to. No. Things have been taken out of the brain. Neurons have been destroyed to the point that they're acting out of character because they don't have something to hold them back. Does that make sense? And so we just need to understand that. This is a disease of the brain. It is not a disease of the soul. And so people need to understand that. Number 5. In Alzheimer's patients, caregivers need to feed the patient as aspiration can occur if they do not. There are times when you have to feed them because they cannot feed themselves, but in most cases, you need to allow them the opportunity. Let's say that you're sitting with a loved one. There's 3 times the chance of choking by feeding them yourself because you're not seeing where the food's going. And so you don't know whether or not they're chewing it up and whether they're swallowing it or not. I tell people who are dealing with loved ones, eat with them. Take as long as you need. Use a red plate, something about the color. No pun intended about Alabama. But red plates bring out the color of the food and makes it a little bit more attractive to them. Whatever works, right? Whatever works. But it's important that we do that. Put food on brightly colored plates. They may desire to eat more when you eat with them as opposed to feeding them. Number 6, head trauma is a leading cause for dementia among young adults. It's very true. Each year, 200,000 people end up in the hospital due to head injuries in the United States. Sports, car and motorcycle crashes, post-concussion that is repeated can cause apathy and forgetfulness. Every 20 seconds in America, a traumatic brain injury occurs. Signs can include headache, confusion, blurred vision, memory loss. 9.5% of all dementias can be attributed back to one head injury. Head injuries are the most common cause for dementia in teens, with infection, with alcoholism being the other two. Number 7, 13% of people ages 65 and older will develop Alzheimer's disease. That is true. Every 68 seconds in America, in a day, every 68 seconds, someone in America is developing Alzheimer's. It's estimated by the year 2060, there will be 13.8 million people with this disease, and that will be every 33 seconds. Again, dementia is the family name. Alzheimer's is the firstborn child. It's the most common. 60 to 65% of folks have that. Number 8, with dementia, there is a direct connection to the loss of neurons in the brain to this disease. It's very true, very true. Our nerve cells in our body are like computer chips within the brain. They send brain signals to each other, and they begin to short circuit these cells so that they cannot work together. Some say we have as many as 100 billion nerve cells within our brain, but as we get older, in our late 40s or early 50s, we begin to lose one every second. Now don't panic, because do the numbers and you're going to live a long, long time before they're all gone. But that's 86,400 in a day brain cells that we will lose. When Alzheimer's destroy these cells, they cannot be reproduced and can cause dementia or Alzheimer's, which has a protein called tau that can clog up the things within your brain. Number 9, feeding tubes can be of great aid to an Alzheimer's patient, adding weight and nutritional balance to their body. Please remember, I am not a doctor, but more people who I've talked to concerning this suggest the idea that it does not help. First of all, it's a surgery, so that means stay in a hospital. Ever gone to a hospital even though you have your mind and you lose track of time and other things because you're there in a strange surrounding? Yeah. Well, even more so for a dementia patient. Secondly, it does not reduce the risk of pneumonia having a feeding tube. Sometimes there's a lot of swelling due to the surgery. Sometimes a person will spit up the food coming through the feeding tube. One of the things that a feeding tube does, it takes away the human contact of feeding and holding the hand of the person that you are taking care of. Human contact is so very important. We have thousands of human receptors in one finger. And think about a hand that you hold of that mother or that loved one or that daddy or that granddaddy as you're talking to them and eating with them and helping them. That means so very much. Toward the end of the Alzheimer's journey, part of the brain that recognizes hunger stops working so that a person does not feel that they are starving. And then number 10, To an Alzheimer's patient, a black rubber mat is often perceived as a hole, and they will not step on it. That's true. There's something about the idea that with dementia, even though the brain is changed and altered, sight continues in most cases for a long, long time. And yet the perception, we're going to talk about various kinds of dementia, and there is one that toward the end of their dementia journey, the only way that they can walk is straight forward. They cannot turn from side to side. And so people have to understand with this patient, their bedroom needs to be at the end of the hall because they either can't turn their head or they can't understand directions, and so straight ahead is the only way that they can go. But a black rubber mat can sometimes stop people from leaving, wandering, whatever the case may be. Dr. David Hutchins, I mentioned him before, who owns land around Tupelo, Mississippi, has a farm there, but works in a big building that he runs in Boston, Massachusetts, said that there was a lady in one of their dementia units that just kept on getting out. Even though, like nursing homes, they have warning signals and they have lights that go off and whatever, she'd somehow get out about 11:30 at night to go get her cigarettes at 7-Eleven. Well, needless to say, that's not good for all kinds of reasons. And they were trying everything they could to stop her from doing it, but she was still doing it. And somebody said, let's get one of those big rubber mats, about this long and that wide, and just put it in front of the door. She thought it was a hole, and so it stopped her. Whatever works, right? Yeah. Well, with that idea in mind, let's talk about some facts and figures about Alzheimer's itself. Presently, there's 6.9 million Americans that are afflicted with this disease. 120,000 people die every year with Alzheimer's disease. It's currently the 6th leading cause of death in America, and the 5th leading cause of death for people 65 and older. As we said earlier, 13% of people over the age of 65 and 47% over the age of 85 will have this dementia. Now think about your congregation. How many people do you have in your congregation that are 65 and older? You know the numbers. There's folks in this audience. 1 out of 8 is going to deal with this. If they're 85, almost 1 out of 2 will be dealing with this. One of the lessons that I do in the dementia workshop is, what does a dementia-friendly church look like? Because we have to think of it a little bit differently. If we still want to minister to them and we still want them to be able to come to church, and if they so desire to still come to church, your nursery back there is an excellent place for it, where they can both see and hear the audience. How do we make our building, how do we make our congregation, how do we make our church family dementia friendly? Because 1 out of 8 folks 65 and older are going to deal with this, and 1 out of 2 if they're 85 and older. So it's something that's real for us to think about. 330 people turn 65 every hour. That's 8,000 a day in America. What we don't understand, but yet is so true, is Alzheimer's affects women more than men. For the 6.9 million Americans that have this, 4.6 million are women. Over 2 million are men. And yet, who is it that typically are the caregivers? Women, right? And yet, for some reason, and there's studies that have been done, the magazine that I talked about deals with that. Dementia comes from a Latin word meaning out of mind. It's the permanent loss of multiple intellectual functions I'm not good with computers, and some of you folks do that all the time, but it's like a computer where the hard drive has crashed. The files are there, but they cannot be pulled up. On the second page that you have, you can see some of the things that are affected by this. You have this page in front of you. With Alzheimer's, there's loss of memory. It attacks that part of the brain, the hippocampus, first. For you who have loved ones or folks that you work with that deal with dementia, do you remember seeing that contorted face? You see, their hearing's okay, but their mind cannot process what you say. And then there's problems with speech and understanding. They can hear, unless there's some problems with hearing, but understanding what you say. Typically with dementia patients, you can ask them this question: do you know who I am? It takes them 7 seconds to process what you just asked and what that means. Do you know who I am? It's real. Because with dementia, that part of the brain that understands those things is gone. A lot of times you may see it on the tip of their tongue. They're trying to say the right thing. They're trying to say, but they can't come up with a word. That's not aging. Teepa Snow, Teepa Snow. If you want to look at that, she has a lot of great work about this. I asked her in a workshop, I said, Miss Teepa, what's the difference between aging, like we all are going to do, and dementia? Here's her illustration. She said, you ever come out of Walmart and you think, well, let's see, I think I parked over here on the second row and I'm not red car. And you found out that it was the fourth row. And yeah, you were in the red car, but it was on the fourth row. She said, that's aging. We just slow down a little. Dementia patients come out and they ask themselves the question, where am I? How did I get here? Who brought me here? And I don't know what kind of vehicle. See, that's dementia. Because there's that confusion that goes along with it. Problems with speech and understanding. Changes in personality and behavior. Typically with dementia, they can become either bitter or better. Some people who may have not been the kindest people now are sweeter and more understanding because that's just the way the disease has brought them. Others that were the sweetest of angels are now bitter and ugly. Ever notice someone, greatest child of God you ever know, begin to curse and swear and do things that they never would have done in their right life? Why? It's because the inhibitory circuits that are in your brain that would be there to sort of hold you back from saying or doing the wrong things have been destroyed because of this disease. And therefore, there's no governor, if you will, to hold them back from doing and saying those things. So again, remember, it's a disease of the brain. It's not a disease of the soul. Increased reliance on activities of daily living. They can't dress themselves like they once did. Things of that nature. Now I want you to see some brain samples. These are pictures actually taken of diseased brains. And you can see there's truth in the pictures. Normal brain on the side, and you see the shrunken, wrinkled brain there because of Alzheimer's. Amnesia, the loss of memory functions. You see again the holes in that left side there, or at least my left, of those early, middle, and end parts. In early stages of amnesia, where people can't remember the things, they forget little details, misplace things, write notes as reminders. They realize that they have memory problems and they try to cover up. Middle stages, they forget phone calls, location of purses, and medication, hundreds of daily details. They forget the past. They forget the fact that they can't remember, and they argue about it. In the end, they forget recent or past events, and eventually their memory becomes completely blank. And then there's aphasia, the loss of ability to understand the spoken or written word. Again, 72% longer for them to understand even simple statements that you make. And then there's apraxia. And again, you see the difference in those brains. Apraxia is the loss of ability to perform remembered motor task. You might say, Mama, why don't you take this and call so-and-so? And they're going to look at that and say, what is this? And you said something about a comb. What does a comb look like? They're not trying to be hard. They just have lost that ability to button a shirt, to bathe, to shave, even how to use the bathroom. And then agnosia, inability to recognize what things look like or feel like or who someone is. With Alzheimer's, there is appetite and sleep issues. It's called sundowning. Some of you have heard that before, where they sleep in the day and then they wonder and get agitated at night. They get their times. That rhythm isn't like it used to be, and so they can't figure it out. And you can see there the hole in that brain that causes that misunderstanding. A lot of times it begins at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I've been told. And so those are just some of the issues that we go with. I've mentioned to you that the most common is Alzheimer's, but there's other kinds. Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease is part of that. Robin Williams had this illness. Vascular dementia is the second most common, where there's a lot of intellectual losses, strokes, mood swings. I met a fellow polishing the pulpit, and he was talking to me about his father, and he said, we finally had to put our father in a special unit because Mom was doing her best to stay with him, and he had vascular dementia where strokes go in, and therefore his thinking is sometimes rattled. And one day he got so mad that the hospital bed, a metal hospital bed that he was sleeping in, he kicked it and broke it. And we thought, he's got to go somewhere else because he could hurt our mom, even though he would not even mean to do so. And then frontotemporal, which is extremely progressive. Let me give you a little bit more background behind those different kinds of dementia. How much time do I have? 10 minutes, thank you. With Alzheimer's, which is the most common, 60% of those with dementia have it. There's a lot of beta amyloid plaque. They have trouble holding on to details. They're good with their old memory. They can remember things from 30, 40 years ago. That's where we can be a blessing to them. This fellas, there's somebody in your congregation that has it. You can go and talk about the good old days with him, and he can do that with great detail, and that can be helpful to the family. But new details are lost first. Recent memory becomes worse. They have misspeaks of words because they can't put the right words together. And there's often more conflict and not sure where trying to find that right word. One of the earliest symptoms of Alzheimer's is when people increasingly become indecisive. They just can't make decisions. They have trouble finding their way. Going one way is okay, but reversing it makes it harder for them to do. My mom got lost, and so thankfully she was willing to give up her keys because they'd lived in Northport, Alabama for 50 plus years, but she got lost, and thankfully called our dad, and she would say, they took my keys away. Well, she knew why, even though she may have forgotten. With Lewy body dementia, there's a lot of movement problems and falls, visual disturbances, delusional thinking, episodes where the body becomes rigid. Remember I talked about they can't see except straight ahead? Insomnia and sleep disturbances. There's various symptoms concerning this disease. No consistent pattern in what they do and how they act. In other words, it's not the same each time. One time they'll fall, and then they'll not fall. And another time they'll fall, and there's head injuries. And then movement. The body becomes more rigid. Number 3, gravitational awareness change. They begin to lean over when walking, and they think it's okay to do that. Because again, they can only go in one direction. Visual disturbances is what often Lewy body people deal with. Visual hallucinations. Didn't you just see that? There's nothing there, but they saw it. They're at the railing. They think something bad's happening, and they think they're seeing animals. This happens typically later in the afternoon or early evening. They will argue with you. Lanes and highways, they say, become snakes. There's bats flying around or animals coming at them. Delusional thinking is one of them. And then finally, number 5, they become rigid. And then there's frontotemporal. This is the most common kind of dementia for people who are 65 or earlier. There's impulse and behavior control loss, not memory loss, but sometimes because there's no governor to hold them back, they may say unexpected, rude, odd things. They may eat a whole lot more than they need to. Alcohol and sometimes immoral behavior becomes a part of their lifestyle. There's a lot of apathy, and they have a hard time communicating. And then with vascular dementia, again, because of brain and because of the heart and things that go along with it, a person may stay for a period of time the same way, but then changes take place after a surgery or maybe after COVID. The plaque builds up, the stroke gets into the capillaries. There's good days and bad days. There's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Wonder why the changes become so great and quick. They may start crying or even have panic attacks and not even know why they're having a meltdown. You see, there's dead brain cells, and there's huge problems with memory or vision or motor difficulties. Well, it's not a very pretty picture, but it's real. And so if you're dealing with this, let me give you some things perhaps at the end to keep in mind. It's a disease of the brain. It's not a disease of the soul. Even that patient has to believe they're still in charge. Think about it. When you cannot make choices, you feel all is lost. The choice between 2 things and nothing is significant, even to a dementia patient. In regards to your caregiving or you're going to visit them, if your presence does not add value to them, your absence is not going to make a difference. So when you go, you need to put that face on, be as kind and as loving as possible, because they're dealing with this 24/7. Teepa Snow puts it this way: if they can do a piece of the puzzle, let them do it. That's a victory if they can do one thing: fold some clothes, make something simple. They don't know that they don't know. Understand that. Be on their level. How do you approach a dementia patient? One doctor will ask patient, "What are you doing for fun these days?" Open-ended question. And perhaps you can look and see what they have to say. Do what they can do. If he can no longer play golf, then put a putting green in the house, and when all the family's together, enjoy that. She used to enjoy playing cards, but she can no longer do that. But she still loves the chip and the dips, and she can sort the cards by suits and sit with the family. In Clinton, Tennessee, a lady was telling me about her husband that had one of these progressive kinds of dementia. And she said he was the owner of all this land, our big farm, and he'd be out with those John Deere tractors and just doing hundreds of acres, but he couldn't do it anymore. Finally, one day, I believe he had vascular dementia. One day, the workman came to her and said, "Ma'am, if you will allow your husband to go with us as we go out in the fields, we will take extra good care of him. We will make sure that he is not hurt at all." She said, "You should have seen the grin on my husband's face as he climbed up those steps into that tractor, sat there in that cab like he had done for hundreds and hundreds of days, and with the biggest smile on his face, acted like he was the one planting those hundreds of acres." Let them do what they can do. Then 3 words: let it go. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's not worth arguing with somebody. Don't use the word, "Mama, don't you remember?" In Birmingham, Alabama, my brother and I and our father was sitting there, and that lady looked at us and said, "Boys, husband, every time you say to your mama, Dot, 'Don't you remember?' she can't. And it's frustrating her, and it's going to frustrate you. Get it out of your vocabulary." People will ask your question, "How's your mom doing?" Well, there's 2 ways of answering that. I can tell them all the terrible things that happened just today and yesterday, or I can choose to remember the good thing and say, "You know what? Today was a good day. We enjoyed a strawberry milkshake together." It's up to us. May God bless us as we try to minister to our own and minister to those that are in need. Thank you for your very kind attention. I'll be more than glad to talk to you about your own situations after services if you're interested.